All right, let's go ahead and get started. It's time for the March monthly market report. You know, it feels like spring. I found a Charles Dickens quote, or I saw a Charles Dickens quote that said, spring is when it's summer in the sun and it's winter in the shade. You know, hopefully where you're at, sort of summer is starting to creep in, maybe a little bit warmer. I know here in Virginia, we're starting to warm up. Hopefully where you're at, it's that way as well. We've been through, it seems like maybe a long, cold winter, and we're going to talk about that, maybe affecting some of the things we're seeing right now in real estate. We'll talk about that in the economy and everything happening in the market. So with that as sort of a backdrop, let's go ahead and get started. All right, let's get started here. Don't let winter weather fool you. Spring momentum is coming. You know, we saw a pretty cold winter, I think, in most parts of the country. The reality is that you know, a lot of folks ended up, you know, buried under ice and snow. Certainly the case here. Realtor.com said Winter Storm Fern, which dumped snow and ice across large swaths of the country, likely disrupted some closings, weighing on the market and making it difficult to pick out the housing market momentum trend from the weather noise. I think that's very well said. You know, we sometimes see some of these trends and go, okay, was it the weather? Was it the market? Was it, you know, what was it? I think we can look at pretty confidently right now and say, you know, some of the things that we saw in January, one of those being existing home sales, even pending home sales, were affected by the weather. I'll show you this right here from NAR, January 2026 sales slowing, but sort of expecting this February rebound. You see, it's kind of one of the lowest January numbers we've seen in quite some time. I would attribute that 100% to the weather. I certainly think a lot of folks, certainly from Texas all the way up to the Northeast, were covered in snow and ice and couldn't get out of the house, didn't want to get out of the house, and that made an impact. But here would be my message right now: don't let that lead you to believe it's not going to be, a year that what we've talked about is a little bit steadier, a little bit healthier. I think that's true. Housing Wire said with mortgage rates near 6%, weekly housing demand rebounded as winter weather effects began fading from the data. The improvement appears tied more to the normalization following the late January snowstorm than the structural acceleration in market activity. So I think we can sort of point to that. We know some of the dynamics that are in the market right now. One of those positive dynamics being mortgage rates. I'm not going to cover that today, but we know we bounced around the low sixes, dip our toe into the fives. That's a good thing. The other thing this time of year is we know a lot of new inventory comes on the market in the spring. This is average listing count going all the way back to 2017. What do you see? The green bars there, March, April, May, where listings and inventory starts to come online and gives people more choices than ever before, and that's a good thing. Actually, inventory by and large, and we've talked about this a lot on the monthly market report, is making a comeback. This is look at active listings every February. So this is, imagine taking a shot in time, February each year going all the way back to 2017. We can say, look, more listings right now happened or were active in February than 2025, 24, 22, 23, 21. Getting back to those numbers of pre-pandemic and in sort of the pre-COVID era active listing number, that's a good thing. Lawrence Yun said inventory is higher in the spring and summer, but that is when also more buyers are in the marketplace. Days on market shorten, multiple offers become more prevalent. Why am I saying all this? I'm telling all this because coming out of spring, I think we will see maybe a little bit more active March, given that people were sort of stuck inside, given that people have, experienced this winter, and be prepared for that. Be out in the market talking about that. Also, this time of year, this is interesting. I think we know it, but I want to remind you of it. Homeowners typically sell faster in the spring, right? Something comes to market, it sells faster. You see the green bars there, March, April, May, getting ready for this sort of spring market, things selling faster. We want to see that for sure. Bankrate said during warmer months, buyers are more easily able to get out and about to see homes. Home exteriors are easier to see with no snow, and interiors look more inviting when there's plenty of sunshine coming in. So, message right now as we've come out of this, and we're coming out of this long, cold winter, we're seeing some positive signs right now, and I believe it's going to be a spring market that will be, a little bit steadier, not yet off to the races. Remember, we talked about that. But one that is going to be good, and one that maybe slowed down over the last couple of months due to a lot of cold weather across the country. I think there are questions, though, heading into the spring market about the economy. It feels uncertain, but I want to kind of unpack some of the data. And I believe when you do that, it's not as scary. You see all these sort of images on social media and things like that, facts over fear. Right? In life, we want to look at the facts, not the fear. Fear doesn't follow a logical pattern in our lives. I'm sure we all know that. You come up with a situation, feel like, okay, this is going to happen. Before you know it, you've played it out into some terrible scenario. And we certainly all do that. But if we'll stick with the facts instead of the fear, I think we are much better off. One of the things that creates fear is headlines. I've got a kind of a snapshot of these that our research team gathered. The reality right now, the economy heading for a recession, economy shrinking, key market data points signaling fear, all of those things. Oh, by the way, we have a war in Iran, and certainly that we want to see that, come to a conclusion, people out of harm's way. I think everybody wants that. Not going to get into all of that today, but there's a lot of uncertainty, right? A lot of uncertainty that maybe wasn't around even a couple of weeks ago, uncertainty about the economy. Let's look at what folks are saying that measure these things, that watch these things around the economy. Wells Fargo said our national model simulations of 10 to 30% sustained increase in oil prices do not come close to generating a U.S. recession or markedly changing the trajectory of core inflation. Okay, so what they're saying is, as oil prices rise, which that seems to be the outlook, is we don't see that, sort of causing a recession right now. One of the things that I think has been true in the economy as well is mortgage rates following oil prices. And I think that could be true. Inflation following oil prices, certainly more to be determined there, or more to be written there. But I do believe there are signals the economy is stabilizing. Economic growth is expected to kind of rebound this year. And we've even said, in the real estate business, we're expected to sell about 10% more homes. That's a good thing too. Mortgage rates have decreased as inflation is sort of stable. We feel that we're up at 7.25 maybe this time last year, down to 6 right now. And economists, the third point there, economists aren't sort of saying we feel like we're heading into a recession. Okay, so that's the reality of surveys and what people are saying. You could say, well, I feel differently because of this or that, and certainly I would hear you in that. But what I would encourage you to do is look at the facts versus anything that's maybe fear-based or politically based or whatever the perspective is. The federal government shutdown clearly sent the economy careening off its strong path in the fourth quarter of, they're talking about last year, which is one-off that won't be repeated in early 2026. Certainly, I think that will be true, and we'll continue to watch that. If you start to look at economic growth in GDP quarter over quarter, you can see growth weaker in the first quarter here. You see it in the yellow bar there on the far right. But the reality is we've seen strong quarters for the last couple of years. The traditional sort of definition of a recession is 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP. We've had one here, one there. But not that. So keep all of that in mind. I think that's important. The government shutdown hurt growth at the end of the year. The economy will likely bounce back in early 2026. But it isn't harmless to do prolonged shutdowns. Overall, the U.S. economy was resilient in 2025, despite many headwinds. Solid consumption, the AI boom kept the economy growing. Certainly, we hear a lot about that, and we know that is a real thing. The reality is inflation has stabilized over the past 2 years. This is a look at each month, whereas what they call CPE, and I mean PCE, where has that been? And we went up high over kind of 22 that time, and it's sort of flattened out right at this 3% level. And you see right there the Federal Reserve target rate of 2%. We're not there, but we are stable. That is a good thing. The other good thing for the economy and for our business is mortgage rates are at the lowest level in 3.5 years. Why is that a good thing for the overall economy? Housing has such a massive impact on the overall U.S. economy. The dollars that are generated not only from a sale, but from construction to all the things that are associated with a home. That is a very, very good thing. Unemployment, as I'm recording, came out this morning, ticked up just slightly higher, but it's still holding steady. Even if you look at some of the unemployment headlines and look at this graphic here, this is every month going back to January 2020. And, unemployment spikes up during the pandemic, has come down, but has really been flat, around this, 4%, 4.234% in unemployment over the past several years. That's certainly a good thing. Okay, so coming out of this winter, we see sort of the economic questions that are out there, and there are questions. I'm not trying to say there aren't questions, but I do believe there are facts that we can look at to go, okay, we don't have to buy into the fear of that. I think probably one of the biggest questions right now in real estate are contract cancellations. They're on the rise. They're at a high right now. And really, I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes as we kind of wrap this up talking about that, but really how to avoid them, right? This is purchase cancellations that are rising. I'm going to go into some of the facts here in just a minute, but let me say this. I've had the chance to be on the road this week. I was at Leading RE. Maybe some of you were out there. Great event. Talked to a lot of agents. A lot of people seeing this. I'm sure no matter where you're watching, you could probably say in my market, we've seen more cancellations. I would think that would be true. But when I see this, I think it signals a disconnect between buyers and sellers, right? Sellers kind of going, all right, we don't need to do anything to make this home aggressive. Buyers going, we see a lot of options out there right now, right? We're ready to make a deal. We're ready to see more. There's more inventory. We talked about that online. We want to be able to make the best choice, and everybody buying something should. But Redfin came out and said this: nearly 40,000 home sale agreements nationwide were canceled in January. Listen to that. Equal to 13.7% of homes that went under contract. That's up from 13.1 a year earlier, and the highest January dating back to 2017. Okay, so we're certainly seeing purchase contracts fall out. Number of different reasons. I'm going to get into those, but if you start to look at this is January. Again, remember the graphic we looked every year, January. This is January each year going all the way back to 2017, highest January of contract cancellations that we've seen going back to 2017. The areas of the country where we're seeing cancellations kind of in the sort of west there in Nevada and California, Texas, Florida, Georgia, some of the South states, see Ohio up there. But these are the areas that have some of the highest cancellations rates. Those are the metro areas that are outlined there: Atlanta, Jacksonville, Fort Lauderdale, San Antonio. You see all of those right there, right? So some of these markets where there's more inventory, that's certainly true. Buyers have choices, and sellers maybe aren't as in tune to what is happening in the market so that they can put their best foot forward, if you will, in that whole process. High housing costs, rising inventory have made home buyers more selective. That's certainly true. Home sellers outnumber buyers by a record margin, meaning the buyers who are in the market have options and may walk away if they believe they can find a better or more affordable home. Certainly believe that. Now, let me say something. I told you I was on the road. I was presenting this exact slide, and somebody said, how do they know that there are more buyers, home sellers outnumbering buyers? And I showed this person the notes section of the slide where the source report comes from. And if you're looking at any of these slides here in the monthly market report, inside the notes section is the information you need to the source report if somebody asks you, or if you're curious yourself and you say, hey, I want to go back and I want to look at that and I want to really kind of understand it. Go in there and check that out if you're wondering that. Tips for sellers right now: monitor the market and act quickly. I think agents need to track what's happening, supply, demand, pending sales, all of that. Get it in the hands of your sellers. Do a video, post on social, all the ways that we know we can get things out there. Be ready to negotiate. I think some of this information right now should be in a listing presentation. You should take in your listing presentation and say, look, cancellations are at an all-time high. Let's not end up there. Right? I think there are things that sellers can do right now. If sellers are in that situation, it's probably because they're disconnected. They're not thinking about what's happening in the market. Redfin said buyers frequently back out of deals using the inspection contingency. We certainly know that. They may cancel their purchase because a structural issue came up during the inspection, even if their primary reason for canceling is that they realize the mortgage payments are too expensive. So that's the reality. And I know I'm speaking to everybody that understands the reality. Inside of all of that reporting, these were the top 9 things that might fail an inspection. Structural issues, we know that, roof issues, plumbing, electrical, you see HVAC, water damage, drainage, pest and insect damage, safety and code violations. All of these things are coming up. Remember, a couple of years ago, people were buying things sight unseen. We don't care, we'll fix it. Today, that is not the case. And helping sellers understand that is our job. They might think, well, we saw the whole home sold down the road, for more than we feel like it was worth, and it sold quickly. Why isn't that happening in our house? The market has shifted. Our job is to be the purveyor of everything happening in the market. Use this information, make a video, social post, get it out in the market. Everything that we do, I always like to sort of wrap on this. Most agents know what's happening. We believe the good agents, they understand it, but only great agents can explain what's happening. My hope is with the monthly market report, whether you go back and watch it again, whatever the case is, you can explain what is happening. All right, that is the March monthly market report. Listen, it's always so fun to do this. Our KCM research team does an amazing job of gathering all this information, getting it into your hands so that you can be the most educated agent, the most educated leader in our business. So listen, do this. Take this information and share it. Get it out in front of folks. Use it in a meeting that you're in. Use it with somebody that you're working with, a buyer or seller. But don't let it die here today. It's always such a pleasure to get to be with you for the monthly market report. This is March. We'll see you back in April. Take care.